Hello, I am William Kent, and this is how to write an analysing argument essay, previously known as a language analysis essay. Today I'm going to go through essay questions, what the essay structure is, 6 steps on how to write a language analysis, including introduction, body paragraphs, conclusions, how to deal with an image, how to deal with quotes, suggested timing, and some final advice. The thing to remember with language analysis is that there is no actual essay question that you respond to. This is what is taken from an exam. Write an analysis of the ways in which argument and written and visual language are used in the material to try to persuade others to share the point of view presented. You are looking at how is language used to persuade. With your essay structure, you are still looking at 5 paragraphs minimum. You do need an introduction, you do need 3 body paragraphs, you do need a conclusion-ish. I'll explain what I mean by that later on, but this is not a traditional essay, so the conclusion you can play around with. Lower year levels, you're looking at 700 to 900 words, but for VCE in year 10, you're looking at 800 to 1200 words within 60 minutes. 6 steps to writing a language analysis essay. Step 1, you've got to read the article. Use your dictionaries. You are allowed to use your dictionaries in reading time. Read the article first. After that, read it again, and during the second reading, annotate it. Write on it, scribble on it, underline, highlight. The reason why I say do this with a second reading and not the first is that you have to have read it from start to finish to fully understand it, so you're able to pick up on if something's sarcastic or not. When you do your second reading, note down the issue and the contention. Note it's not your contention, it's the author's contention. After that, plan. You always need to plan. Now for a language analysis, your plan might be just your annotations with a few extra dot points, but you still do need a plan. All of these 3 steps, the first 3 out of 6, so the first half of it, all happens before you actually start writing the first word of your essay. Once you've done this though, obviously the next step is to write your introduction. In your introduction, you want to start by explaining the issue or the whole topic in an opening sentence. You then want to move on, give your contention, you want to give a contention which is not yours, it is the author's. You want to mention the author, the format and the title. You want to summarise the purpose and the audience of the piece. The purpose and the audience are crucial. They matter, and as such, you do need to acknowledge who they are. You also want to mention the dominant tone. Tone is also important, and you're going to want to mention that in every single paragraph that you write. A sample introduction. This was an article about alcohol-fueled violence in Melbourne. Alcohol has become a growing issue in Melbourne, with alcohol-related violence on the streets becoming more common at night time. My first sentence, it's just outlining what is the topic actually about. Then we get it more specific. Writer Toby Hall, in his opinion piece, it's time to take Melbourne's alcohol problem seriously, argues that the current laws and systems in place are not effective enough. Toby Hall, opinion piece, it's time to take Melbourne's alcohol problem seriously. Author, format, title. Argues that the current laws and systems in place are not effective enough. Contention. Hall urges his Victorian readers, there's your audience, to see the need for Melbourne to introduce lockout laws similar to Queensland. There's the purpose. Hall's tone throughout the piece shifts from concern over the dangerous actions of drunk people to shame over how Melbourne is no longer being a leader in progress and is trailing behind Sydney. 2 dominant tones, and we've said here the word shifts, tonal shift, fantastic meta language to use. That there is a sample introduction. If you want to pause it, watch it in HD so you can see the words clearly. That is a good template that you could use. Next up, 6 steps. Step 5, write your body. Even though you only need 3 paragraphs minimum for your body, I do suggest 4. Because you're not following a typical TL structure, your paragraphs don't necessarily have to be as long. That means you can afford one more of them. With your body, you are going to want to include 1 paragraph on the image. A few years ago, students did not do the image really well, and since then, VCAR has been very insistent that the image must be addressed. I suggest doing the image in paragraph 2. You have to link the image to words, so if you start doing phrases in paragraph 1, when you do the image in paragraph 2, you can link it up. You need to note in your body, you are focusing on how is the reader positioned. You're not just listing techniques and saying the writer uses alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of the first sound or the first letter. You're not making a list. You want to focus always. How is the reader being positioned to think, feel, or believe? Not just naming techniques. For everything that you do, you need quotes. Absolutely everything. It's not like a text or a film that you study in term 3 and you've got to try to remember the quotes. The quotes are right there on the page in front of you. So if you're not using them, it will affect your mark. Do not be general or vague with your descriptions either. You must be specific. Link it to specific sections of the text. Here is a sample body paragraph. Hall opens his piece with the statistic that since 2003, ambulance call-outs to alcohol-related incidents have increased by 146%, despite Melbourne's facade of being a cosmopolitan city. First sentence, I've already got 3 specific quotes. Hall also reminds his readers that Melbourne is a world-leading city, having been ranked most livable for the last 10 years running. By suggesting that Melbourne's cosmopolitanness is all a facade, Hall is suggesting to the reader that the city is not actually that great, which may be intended to hurt their pride enough to see that taking action is crucial. His evidence for this is seemingly indisputable, with the statistic intended to shock the reader into agreeing with Hall that Melbourne has a problem and that the problem needs to be dealt with immediately. I've got quotes, I've got what is he doing, and then I've got, most importantly, what is the effect of this on the reader? So what's happening, why, what's the effect on the reader? This bit here, the effect on the reader, the logic behind what he's doing, is where you will get the most amount of marks. It is where the deep analysis is. When you've got 4 of them, you're ready to go on to your conclusion. Something to remember though, if you are doing year 12, you will most likely be doing a comparative analysis. Please refer to my previous comparative video. The skills are the same. You will be given 2 articles or 2 opinion pieces or a blog and a comment. You want to treat them as text A and text B, and you want to discuss them in the same paragraph. Refer to the previous video for how to do that, but remember, 2 texts, 1 paragraph for the best scores possible. Final step, write your conclusion. This is not a typical essay. In a typical text response essay or comparative essay, you have your own contention that you must reinforce. Because you don't have your own contention in language analysis, there is nothing for you to reinforce. However, I do still suggest you need to re-mention the author, the format, the title, his contention or her contention, as well as the purpose. Please note though, you do not ever comment on effectiveness, only on what they've done. Don't ever make comments saying that it was highly effective or that they were able to persuade readers, because we don't know that. Something that might persuade me might not persuade you, and something that might persuade you might be something that I look at and go, nah. So we can never comment on effectiveness, only on what's being done. Finally, I like to mention, in my conclusion, I like to discuss the actual final comments of the article. Most authors leave their articles and opinion pieces with a final zinger, a final barb, to really drive their point home. I like to discuss that in my conclusion. For example, finally, Toby Hall finishes his opinion piece. It's time to take Melbourne's alcohol problem seriously with the comparison of Sydney to Melbourne. These two cities have a long rivalry, and by suggesting that Melbourne is now following behind rather than leading, Hall is encouraging the readers to take action to once again to be a better city, and further reinforcing his central argument that the current laws and systems in place are not effective enough. We have again, author, I use their full name in the introduction and conclusion. The rest of the essay, just use their last. Author, format, title. Final comment that he's making, the effect of it, which I also use to reinforce the author's contention and purpose. The 6 steps again. Read the article, annotate it with a second reading, plan your response. Super important, do not skip this. Write your introduction, write your body paragraphs, write your conclusion. Within your body paragraphs, I have discussed an image. I'll run you through how to do an image in 4 steps. You need to discuss the context. Why was the image included? So this is one body paragraph. Context, why was it included? Very briefly, do the size. Talk about it in relation to the size of the page. Is it large, small? Is it colour? Is it black and white? What's in the content? So what is actually happening in the image? Be specific, but be brief. Next, what's the relevance to the article? What does it add? How does it support the tone of the article? Link it to specific phrases. I've put this one in capitals because it is the most important. You must link your image to specific phrases in the text. That's why I recommend, out of 4 body paragraphs, do the image in the second one, because then you can link it to what you've already been discussing in the first one. Finally, overall effect on the reader. This section here, or this part here, I would say has most of the words, because this section here is where you are getting the most marks. For example, to highlight the negative impact that alcohol has on society in general, and on Melbourne in particular, Hall's piece is accompanied by a large, full-colour image that occupies a quarter of the page, emphasising its importance. The bigger an image, the more important. The photo depicts a man being restrained on the ground by Victorian police officers, with his face clearly showing anger. This is the content, what's happening. The anger in the man's eyes suggests that he is capable of violence, and this is reinforced by the fact that 3 officers are required to hold him down while another 2 stand by ready to assist. The image also reinforces that, and here's the linking phrase to the text, police resources are stretched thin, as there are 5 officers occupied with 1 drunk person. Officers who, by extension, are not out patrolling the streets or dealing with any of the rest of the hundreds of Victorians affected by alcohol. The overall effect of the image is a further reinforcement that Melbourne does indeed have an alcohol problem and that the current systems in place are inadequate to deal with it. Content, size, relevance, overall effect. Content, size, relevance, overall effect. Overall effect and the content and the relevance are the ones that have the most words. Finally, I've covered this in every video so far, but incorporating quotes. Here, ambulance call-outs to alcohol-related violence increased by 146% since 2003. Hall uses this claim to highlight the problem of alcohol. You just have a quote slapped in, and then you explain it. That is the basic version. Instead, you want to incorporate it into your own words. Hall opens his piece with the statistic that since 2003, ambulance call-outs to alcohol-related incidents have increased by 146%, despite Melbourne's facade of being a cosmopolitan city. The way to tell if you've done this well, just putting it in your own words, is if you delete all of the quotation marks, does the sentence still make sense? You can test it. I won't read it again, but the sentence still makes sense. It could be written in my own words. That's how you know the quote has been used well. With timing, all equally important. Planning, writing, proofreading, just like with anything you do. If you only have 60 minutes, I do recommend 5 minutes planning, 50 minutes writing, 5 minutes proofreading. 72 minutes, that would go up to 6, 60 and 6. Please note, I haven't factored in reading. Your reading should be done within reading time. As such, when I get to my final advice, on the exam, do this section first. For your 15 minutes of reading time, you should spend the first 1 minute choosing your text response essay topic, and then spend the next 14 minutes reading the article. That way, when you are allowed to pick up your pen, everything's fresh and you're good to go straight away. Section C is language analysis. If you leave it until the third section though, if you leave it till last, it won't be fresh in your head. You'll have done 2 other sections, you'll have forgotten the article, and you will have to waste time reading it again. It is a waste of time. Instead, I recommend do this section first, or for EAL, do it the first section that you're allowed to after listening time. When you're getting ready for it, practice, practice, practice. It is the only way to improve. When you are practicing, do it under timed conditions. There's no point being able to write a great essay in 3 hours if you only get 60 minutes on the exam, or 72 minutes in a SAC. Plan and proofread. As with everything, it's super important. Once again, I am William Kent. Thank you for listening.